Okay, so there's a few additional things I'll show and talk about on the option input screen, new in BEopt version 2. So one thing I'll mention is that here at NREL, we've developed something called the National Residential Efficiency Measures Database, which actually under the Help menu you can find, if you click on this, make sure my internet's working, okay, it actually brings up the website of the database. And so this is a database to provide standardized measures, costs, and let's say properties or simulation inputs for residential buildings, residential efficiency measures. And this is a database that's publicly available. It has, it can be integrated into software projects. There's a number of third-party software tools that are using this database, and we've switched to using this database as well for BEopt. And the nice thing about this database is that it's set up to provide a lot more information than we previously had available in BEopt, so that we can more appropriately be having costs represent the situation that you're in. And also to, well, it also vets the properties of the different options, but it provides relationships between different options, so that, for example, when I come to the wood stud category, so let me go to my existing building here. For the wood stud wall category of my existing building, I said it was an uninsulated 2x4 wall. Therefore, when I look at some of my my post-retrofit situations, I only get presented with wall types that are also 2x4. This is sort of filtered automatically by the measures database, and therefore we get this relationship information as well in BEopt. So it helps to tailor our interface so that we don't show 2x6 walls when you started with a 2x4 wall. But the most important thing about this project is the cost information that's in it. And it helps us in quite a few different ways. So the first way it helps us is, let's go back to our existing building, and we'll go to the unfinished attic here. So here in the unfinished attic category, we have R11 fiberglass ceiling insulation. So this is the attic floor R11 insulation. When we then look at our post-retrofit designs, let's go over here to see all the costs. And so there's actually multiple costs because you could be potentially insulating the ceiling or the roof. So the cost to go from R11 insulation to R60 insulation is $2.50 a square foot of ceiling area. If I were to go back to the existing building and say, well, actually my existing building has R30 already, now when I come to my post-retrofit and I look at the R60 option, it's a smaller cost. And so we have costs that are being calculated specific to the option for the situation that you're in, going from either R11 to R60 or R30 to R60. In BEopt version 1, all we had is a cost associated with R60 itself. It didn't know how it was being used, what you had before, and so it was very awkward and cumbersome for the user to put in appropriate cost data for the situations that they're in. So it's a lot more tailored for the user's analysis, which is a big benefit of using the measures database. Another example is that if we come down to the air conditioner, the cost of, I don't know if this is a great example, but if we were to investigate, let's say we had an existing building with no air conditioner, and we wanted to look at installing an air conditioner in the context of a retrofit, again, we would actually have a different cost than if we were installing an air conditioner in the context of new construction. Presumably, it's higher cost to install an air conditioner. In retrofit, you've got to deal with some existing infrastructure and get down into the crawl space and that sort of thing. So anyway, there's cost that reflects not only what options you have in your existing building, but also if you're in new construction or retrofit analysis, we can have costs tailored to those different analysis modes. We also have, and we'll see this more when we get into the library manager, but we also have costs now disaggregated by material versus labor. That's something the measures database provides. And so you'll find that when you create a new option in BEopt, you are required to supply the material cost of that option, but BEopt will default labor costs for you for all the different ways in which that option may get used, whether it's being installed in new construction or installed in retrofit, or replacing an existing option in retrofit, or getting removed from the building. So we have more detail in our costing, material versus labor. And then finally, we disaggregate the costs also as much as possible. So if you're looking at the cost for walls, when you come here into the option input screen, all we have is a single dollar per wall number, but you'll see that when we go into the option editor, we actually have a number of different costs that are being added together to come up with a single number. So this is the aggregated cost that includes both labor and material, but this is the sum of both labor costs and material costs, and for each one of those that could be multiple. So for example, material costs, it could be that you've got the cost of framing plus the cost of cavity insulation separated out. So we have a lot more detail in the underlying cost of BEopt so that you can change just different pieces of those costs if you have better information, or override the entire cost altogether. So that's what I want to talk about, the measures database. So like I say, we are heavily integrated with the measures database. If you have feedback on costs or measures that we should be providing, from the measures database website, there's a way to submit comments and submit data so we can make improvements to that over time. That'll directly help both BEopt and other software projects. I guess I'll just talk briefly about references. So I talked previously about this existing with min replace reference. I'm going to go ahead and just switch to new construction briefly here. And let me actually delete one of these designs here. Okay, so I just have a single building design here in new construction now. So by default, when you're in new construction mode, the reference will be set to your design. And when that's the case, a reference tab doesn't show up because it is the same building design. There's no need to have to show your reference and confuse things. We try to simplify the interface a little bit. When you go to some of these other designs, though, like the B10 benchmark, now you'll get a reference tab showing up. So now you would have energy savings for this design relative to the B10 benchmark. The B10 benchmark, for those of you that don't know, like the existing with min replace reference that I showed earlier, is an automated reference. In this case, it's an automated reference based on what climate you're in. So it's something like ICC, where your wall construction in more extreme climates, you have higher R values. So for example, right now, if I go to the site screen, I'm in Atlanta, and the benchmark has a R13 wall, and there's a wall sheathing category here, and it actually only has OSB, so it's just an R13 wall. Whereas if I come back to the site screen, if I switch to Chicago and come back here, now we've got an R5 on top of a R13 wall. So it's R13 wall plus R5 rigid foam on the outside. So unlike BEopt version 1, in BEopt version 2, you can now see all of the set of options that make up the benchmark right here in this tab. You can see how they get used for different climates. These are all costed physical options that you can in fact select in your design as well. If you want to use some of the benchmark options in your design, you can choose to do that as well. So there's very little now that's unique about the benchmark, aside from that the selection of options is automated and shown to the user.
So when you're on the reference tab here, then everything is grayed out, indicating you cannot select or modify the reference at this point when you have the B10 benchmark selected. So this tab for the reference case is really displaying what the properties of the reference are.
Thanks, Craig. And in fact, that's a good segue into my next point, which is whether it's this automated reference or the min replace reference for retrofit, the two automated references. But one thing that's nice in BEopt 2 that you can do is now that I've selected the B10 benchmark, I could actually switch to user defined. Now everything is enabled. The selection is preserved relative to what the reference previously was. So now I can actually override certain aspects of the benchmark if I want to, but still retain the other pieces of the benchmark without having to go through category by category and select everything. So that we think is a pretty nice capability. So you can override parts of the automated references. We have that flexibility. Or, of course, if you're specifying a user-defined reference, you can go through category by category wholesale and completely make up what you want your reference to be. So we've got full flexibility on what your reference is. And if I didn't already say this, just for clarity purposes, the reference, I think there's a drop down here. Yeah, the reference is essentially used for calculating energy savings and incremental costs on the output screen. That's its purpose. Okay, another new capability in BEopt version 2 is we've added a lot of new functionality for Hvac sizing, for flexibility of defining your Hvac sizes. So let's go ahead and go to the air conditioner category again. And so what you see above the selection of options is a drop-down for the cooling capacity of your air conditioner. You can either choose to use our auto size manual J calculations in BEopt, or you can specify a fixed size if you've done those calculations offline or know what that size that you want to run with is. In the previous version of BEopt, we always auto-sized and you couldn't specify that fixed size. So that's a new capability there. And these are sizes that you can pick on a design basis. So you could say my reference is 5 tons. In my improved building where I've got a CR15 air conditioner and other improvements, maybe I'm going to be going down to a 3-ton system, or maybe I'm going to auto size. So these drop downs are specific to the design that you're in. So in new construction, the improvement is being able to pick fixed sizes. In retrofit analysis, there's an additional capability. So on the existing building for retrofit analysis, it's the same flexibility. You can either have BEopt auto size, or you could say, I know the size of the air conditioner in this building. When you come to your retrofit situation, we have this new option called same as existing, which is to say that whatever the size is for your existing building, so in this case it was an auto-sized value. So BEopt's going to auto-size this. Perhaps it chooses 4.5 tons. That means that these buildings will have 4.5 tons as well. If you make upgrades to them, the HVAC installer may still install the same size air conditioner as was previously in the house. So that's what same as existing is in. And that's the default, is to say it's the same as existing. But you can come in here and say, well, actually, we'd like to investigate downsizing benefits, so let's go ahead and auto-size, or we know, again, what the size is going to be. So we've got the sort of the full flexibility of sizing capabilities here. And for retrofit analysis, what BEopt is doing that makes this a little bit, what actually made this feature a little bit difficult to implement, is the fact that, let's say that, well, so here's an example. I think we have it right now. So we have an existing air conditioner of SEER 8, and maybe I should actually select this. No, my note's all messed up now. Let me go back and let me rename this to call this SEER 13 at wear out. I'll stick with that. So in this situation, if we were to pick auto size, what we're actually going to have is we're going to have 9 years. There's 9 years remaining life, the difference between the lifetime and the age of the SEER 8 air conditioner. So you're going to have 9 years of the SEER 8 at whatever size BEopt calculated. And then we're going to run another simulation starting at year 10 where we can then downsize. So the downsizing will only occur when you actually have an air conditioner replacement.
So Scott, you're assuming that not only has the SEER gone up to SEER 13, but perhaps there have been some envelope improvements that reduce the load.
Yes. Yep. So if you had done wall installation, if you put in wall installation in your building, or you're investigating wall installation in your building, when you're then at year 10, when you put in the SEER 13, that's when you would be calculating what the size of that equipment is. So maybe a better example is there may be other equipment or appliances that between years 1 and years 10 are getting replaced or improved, and maybe some after year 10. And so those improvements that are made after year 10 would actually not get incorporated in this downsizing calculation because you're going to be putting in the SEER 13 in year 10, and that's when you're going to get your downsizing benefit. Hopefully that's clear. Just a couple more things on the screen, and then I'll take some questions if people have them. We do have also some new modeling technologies in BEopt version 2. We've got a new category called electric baseboard, particularly probably of interest for existing buildings analysis. We also have, in the water heater category, we have an electric tankless water. Again, maybe more of an existing building capability. And the last new modeling technology that we added is actually something that only shows up for Energy Plus because DO2 cannot model it. So in DO2, in the mechanical ventilation categories, we have supply and exhaust ventilation and ERVs. If I were to switch to the Energy Plus simulation engine, now you can see that actually some HRVs show up as well. So we have heating recovery ventilators available in the Energy Plus version as well. So those are some new technologies available to you. The last thing I'll mention here on the option input screen is just some small improvements we made. For example, this matrix here, if you hover over it, you can now see the name of the option if you sort of use this for selection, so you can very quickly make some selections or verify what options were selected without having to go to the category. For each column, we have these little question mark icons so that you can get more documentation on what these different values being displayed are. And finally, you can also right-click on this screen, and you can customize exactly what columns show up in here. So, for example, we have the whole house CFM, which is actually, this is a calculated value based on the square feet of my home and the number of bedrooms, or maybe bathrooms, I think bedrooms. So this is the ASHRAE 62.2 calculation, and then some of these are inputs for options. So, for example, I could toggle on the fan power, and now you can see the fan power is in watts per CFM per fan. So we're starting to add more customization to the users to be able to display what they want to